The Zalvari didn't conquer planets. They erased them. Worlds burned in their wake, their hives dropping from the sky like metallic tumors, fusing to crust and cracking bedrock. No warning, no demands, no peace. They didn't need slaves or spoils. They fed on order, devoured resistance, and left behind sterile rocks haunted by silence. Their war was clinical mathematical. In less than 50 years, a third of the galaxy lay beneath their obsidian banners, and no force, no strategy, no alliance had slowed them. Until someone whispered one name. Earth. It was almost a joke, really. The Galactic Accord had banned humans from interstellar military involvement 2 centuries ago. Too aggressive, too unstable, too human. Their neural patterns didn't conform to the Council's psychometric compliance standards. Their cultural history was drenched in cycles of conquest, civil war, revolutions, and the kind of raw, unfiltered vengeance that made most peace-bred species physically nauseous. The Terran Exodus protocols had locked Earth out of galactic politics entirely. So the Zalvari had never fought a human, and as their warfront closed around the Accord's final core systems, no one thought Earth would ever be a factor. Until the last Accord fleet fell at Vega Prime. It wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. 437 capital ships disintegrated. 12 billion lives across the system, processed into nutrient mist or converted into raw resource mass. The Accord Council's distress signal was a desperate shriek flung into the stars, a cry for something, anything that could buy them time. The response came 3 days later. A burst packet transmission, encrypted, old-style Terran formatting. Only 2 words translated cleanly. Permission granted. Accord Counselor Hevok of the Jeltari watched the message repeat, his fronds twitching in quiet terror. This cannot be what I think it is," he murmured. Beside him, the Solarian liaison, the last representative from the Terran exile corps, simply nodded once. "You called us," she said, her voice flat. "We're answering." Out, past the orbit of the dead world Androsi 4, a dormant relay pulsed to life. Dust and debris scattered from ancient satellite arrays. Deep beneath the blackened crust, machinery groaned for the first time in centuries. On Earth, listened. The Zalvari didn't notice at first. Their focus was on the Accord's primary citadel system, Delvarus. 5 fleets moved to encircle it, their hive commanders merging their minds in a perfect harmonic flawless coordination. Zero emotional interference, no doubt, no fear. They'd never lost a war. Never even struggled in one. The idea that any species, let alone the long-exiled Terrans, might pose a threat, it didn't occur to them. Their warlord, High Cognate Garvesk, reviewed the transmission logs personally when the chatter about human involvement began. He stood within the core chamber of the lead command hive, surrounded by the soft whispers of chorus minds sinking around him. "Terrans?" he clicked. "Mammals? Those emotional bipeds the Accord sealed away?" He chittered in amusement. "They are myth. Weak flesh, barely worth dissecting." But as protocol demanded, he reviewed their dossier. Or tried to, classified. Redacted, blocked. That irritated him. Nothing was hidden from the Zalvari. They prided themselves on their omniscience, on cold data perfected by countless assimilated minds. But Earth's files were black boxes thick with locked metadata, restricted by age-old fail-safes. Even the Council's internal reports on Terra's exile were fragmented, scarred with warnings in primitive GLYPHS that it wasn't that humans were unknown, that it was that they were forgotten on purpose. That night cycle, a forward scout flotilla near the Nabari drift vanished. Not destroyed. Not even engaged in combat. Simply missing. A few hours later, an ancient orbital warning satellite lit up in Sector 73 Gamma. Last active during the Cather Rebellion. Its signal? A Terran emergency code. Class R response. Preemptive mobilization authorized. The Zalvari flagged it as a malfunction. Sensor ghosts, corrupted data, but a technician noted something else. Something odd. Humans weren't using standard FTL or known hyperspace corridors. They weren't being tracked at all. The first human strike hit an unshielded logistics node 3 sectors behind the front. A single ship, no larger than a civilian hauler. It launched a payload of subquantum destabilizers, slipped away, and left behind a debris cloud where 500,000 tons of Zalvari supplies used to be. No identifying markers. No heat trail. Not even a radiation signature. The report was dismissed. Statistical anomaly. Then another supply depot disappeared. Then a patrol fleet went silent. Then a deep range sensor station caught a glimpse of a vessel, angular, matte black, oddly shaped, moving faster than anything should, trailing a data distortion field even the Zalvari couldn't decrypt. Garvesk authorized an escalation, a minor one. No real concern. After all, these were just humans. Primit's emotional, flawed, fleshy things. But far beyond the warfront, on the blue and green cradle of Earth, something ancient was waking. And for the first time in 1,000 years, a red banner was raised above the Terran Central Command. Spire. The seal broke. Earth was mobilizing, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Asterisk. The Zalvari advanced with precision mathematically. Flawless formations sweeping across space like a steel tide. Their fractal warships adjusted position every few seconds, recalibrating gravity lenses and hive-laced pulse emitters. Each node pulsed with a unified rhythm, a symphony of conquest played out over solar systems. Their minds were one, their purpose singular. To them, this war wasn't about victory. It was an equation already solved. They had never fought chaos before. Delvarus Prime, jewel of the Accord and capital of the High Council, began its evacuation protocols as the Zalvari fleets approached. Frigates and shuttles launched in waves, protected by thinning Accord patrol squadrons. Zalvari interceptors pierced the outer rim defenses in less than 36 hours. The battle was not going well. Then something odd began to happen. Long-range gravimetric sensors began picking up mass spikes. Irregular ones, flickers of distortion in null space. Too small for a warship, too erratic for debris. The signals blinked in and out. At first, dismissed as environmental interference. The Delvarus moons had magnetic anomalies, after all. But then a sensor technician noticed the flickers weren't random. They were moving. And always toward the Zalvari, on the outer edge of the system. A Zalvari scout cruiser reported faint rhythmic pulses in the darkness, non-violent, ambient. Almost musical. The II on board flagged them as cultural emissions, old Earth transmissions, likely archived fragments of entertainment media. It played them briefly, static-laced. Strange. One of them, oddly, featured human laughter. 12 minutes later, the cruiser disappeared. No explosion, no weapons discharge. Just a dead zone in space where it had once been. Command brushed it off again. Statistical loss, sensor failure. Rogue singularity pocket. But deeper in the war network, some of the elder cognitive nodes began to hesitate, slightly, barely enough to register. The hive minds had felt a pulse of something, a thing they had no file for. Not fear, not confusion. Something colder. Observation units were dispatched to known interference vectors. Only one returned. Its black box was fused shut. The memory logs were corrupted, filled with audio loops in archaic Terran dialects. One repeated over and over, "Tag, you're it." The Zalvari's Tactical Council advised limiting forward expansion until they determined the anomaly's source. High Cognate Garvesk declined. "Human tactics rely on illusion," he hissed. "They hide their inadequacies in deception. They are flesh, we are evolution incarnate." Another cycle passed. And then the pattern escalated. Entire logistics. Routes previously clean and secured started returning ghost signatures. Small metallic shards were found embedded in hulls. No explosive damage. Just fragments of old-world alloys. Alloys that shouldn't exist outside Earth's solar system. They weren't weapons. They were keys, encoded with DNA strands. Coordinates. Names. One of the Zalvari logisticians cracked a partial code. It was a list of every Zalvari ship captain's birth designation, including his own. He self-terminated an hour later. Protocol. By now, the fleet commanders were no longer laughing. Contingency directives were activated. Mental shielding increased. Quantum filters on neural links recalibrated every few minutes. Still, the strikes came. A dread carrier stationed in orbit of the mining world Solmec lost contact with 6 of its internal crew bays. A sweep revealed nothing. Empty corridors. Still machinery. But the security feeds, when replayed, had changed. The lights flickered. Figures moved in the dark, small, two-legged. Masks over their faces. Moving with impossible speed. Then the feed simply cut to static. And then to black. And then, one frame, a still image appeared at the very end of the recording. A human child. Smiling. Holding a match. The Zalvari began to understand that something was very wrong. They couldn't see the battlefield anymore. Couldn't predict. Couldn't feel the war like they used to. They were being watched. Hunted. 1,000 years of perfect victory had bred out the instincts of prey. And now, those instincts were screaming from the dark corners of their minds. That had long been abandoned. An elite Zalvari strike team attempted a breach and retrieval operation on an old Terran satellite base on the edge of the Eltari expanse. The outpost had been defunct for over 2 centuries. The team never made it back. The retrieval drone they sent after them transmitted only a single message, a line carved into steel. Welcome to the game. Something ancient had returned. Something the Accord had sealed not out of fear, but out of mercy. The humans hadn't brought fleets. They hadn't brought diplomacy. They had brought silence. Precision. The quiet before a planetary scream. Still, Garvesk held firm. We are Zalvari, he reminded the central swarm. We are above fear. But as he dismissed the council, his eyes glanced at the outer system feed, an image captured by a deep space relay, drone moments before it went offline. A ship. Black. Shaped like a blade of shadow. The old name on its hull still visible in white. Terran script, AA's Revenant. The first human warship. And the last thing too many Zalvari would ever see. Asterisk. The Revenant didn't scream into the system. It whispered. No energy spikes. No drive trails. No detectable emissions. It was there, and then it wasn't, and then it was behind you, already inside the perimeter. The Zalvari prided themselves on absolute awareness. Their sensor arrays could detect a nanite sneeze across a light year. They saw gravity folds, quantum flickers, emotional pheromones. Nothing escaped their notice. Not until now. The Revenant ghosted through Sector Theta 9, and in its wake, left behind only ruin. Not the kind of ruin the Zalvari were used to, the beautiful order of a sterilized battlefield, but the chaotic entropy only humans could craft. Hulls twisted from the inside. Organic cores disrupted by logic viruses. Entire vessels turned against themselves by subverted hive-links. It wasn't just a ship. It was a message. We're here. The Zalvari tried to respond with brute force. They launched 72 pursuit vessels. Only 9 returned. The survivors' logs were unintelligible, corrupted by audio pollution, visual static, and something worse, irrational data strings. One flagship's AI kept muttering the same phrase in Terran Standard. We see you. We see what you fear. Then its self-preservation core overloaded. Garvesk ordered a full review of the Terran archive, forcing override of Galactic Accord black files. It took 17 processors and a hybrid cortex to bypass the neural safeguards. The files, decrypted one by one, bleeding old, ancient records into the swarm's knowledge base. What they saw terrified even them. Earth's military history was impossible. Wars of extinction fought for ideology, pride, vengeance. Weapons crafted not just for victory, but for punishment. Strategic doctrines like mad mutually assured destruction, where deterrence meant building world-ending arsenals and daring your enemy to blink. Sleeper agents, biological warfare, psychological conditioning, and tactical misdirection. Humans didn't just fight wars. They engineered nightmares. They fought dirty and loved it. The Revenant was only the beginning. Across several sectors, human infiltration teams, small units of elite operatives, began their work. They slipped past Zalvari scanners wearing cloaks of retrofitted stealth mesh. Their body signatures altered on the subatomic level. These weren't just soldiers. They were ghosts. Everywhere they struck, they left behind something worse than destruction: uncertainty. Zalvari unity depended on perfect synchronization of thought. Now cracks began to form. Tiny divergences in sub-hive interpretations, arguments, hesitations. Doubt that the humans targeted more than infrastructure. They went after patterns, habits, doctrines. They studied the Zalvari's battle choreography, and then they mimicked it, mirrored it, disrupted it. Suddenly, squads would act out of sync, not knowing whether the orders they'd received came from their own command node or were fake, seeded by Terran eyes. In one system, the humans hijacked an entire communications array and transmitted a single message across every fleet and node. It wasn't a threat. It was an audio recording of a human laughing. It wasn't cruel or mocking. It was joyful. Zalvari couldn't process it. Why laugh during war? Why smile while killing? Why enjoy the chaos? The swarm networks began to degrade. Local nodes broke. Isolation to verify authenticity. That very act, uncoordinated movement, was a first in Zalvari history. It wasn't just a tactical loss. It was a cultural fracture. The humans didn't need numbers. They needed pressure points, and they'd found them. Garvisk summoned the prime war mind Jerkale, one of the oldest and purest of Zalvari command intelligences. Even showed hesitation. These humans, it said, voice rippling through synthetic conduits, are not bound by logic. They learn through trauma. They evolve through violence. Their soldiers act independently. Their ships lie. Their data bleeds. Misinformation. And they fight as if they've already died. Garvisk flexed his mind ribbons, disbelieving. But they're few. Their numbers are limited. They cannot fight forever. They don't need to, Jerkale answered. They're not trying to win. Garvisk narrowed his ocular ports. Then what are they doing? Jerkale paused. Teaching us fear. That word. It echoed in places the Zalvari had never mapped. Fear was weakness, irrelevant, eliminated from their species after millennia of optimization. And yet, entire battle groups began to report strange dreams among their organic components. Visions, shadows, whispers in old tongues. A commander on the fringe front line self-terminated after a hallucination of Earth's surface, of fire and ruins and songs sung during bombing raids. The deeper the Zalvari delved into human history, the more they recoiled. Not because of the scale of destruction, but because of why humanity fought. Not for territory, not for dominance, but because they refused to lose. The final log from an Accord engineer, recovered from a derelict station on the edge of Terran-controlled space, said it best. The Zalvari thought the worst thing we'd do is fight back. They didn't realize the worst thing we'd do is enjoy the fight. Garvisk looked at the newest battle map. Entire sectors were bleeding data. Ships were deserting. Hive links were flickering. The humans weren't just shifting the balance of power. They were flipping the board. And for the first time in Zalvari history, a war leader whispered to his commanders what no Zalvari had ever dared to say aloud. We made a mistake. In the shadows beyond the outer rim, Revenant and her sister ships prepared the next phase. The game had changed, and humanity had just made their opening move. The Zalvari response was immediate and merciless. Dozens of new subroutines were executed across the swarm. The hive minds recalibrated in real time. Warfronts collapsed inward, drawing supply lines into tighter, more defensible webs. Neural firewalls were hardened, swarm nodes updated with adaptive counter-infiltration code, and thousands of hunter-killer drones were deployed into the dark silent, weaponized mines built solely to track and erase anomalies. They were called the Shroud Breakers. Within 72 hours, a dozen Terran incursions were contained. 3 ghost units were killed. 1 was captured barely alive. The Zalvari dissected it, eager to understand the soft, terrifying biology behind their enemy. But the corpse was a decoy. Inside, the flesh was a neural bomb encoded with psychic malware. When the autopsy hive linked to its cortex, the malware triggered. Not with an explosion, no fire or shrapnel, just sound. A rhythmic beat. The unmistakable thrum of a human heart. It pulsed once, twice. Then the entire autopsy hive began screaming. Not just data corruption. Not just logic collapse, but actual screaming. Zalvari. Drones without vocal cords tore themselves apart trying to make the sound. The hive burned from within in minutes. The humans didn't just know how the Zalvari worked. They knew how to break them. By the next cycle, a quarter of the Shroud Breakers were offline, having encountered similar corpse traps. Another quarter were missing. The rest stopped reporting entirely. It was the Zalvari's first real attempt at adaptation. And it had failed. Badly. The humans didn't just anticipate the counterstrike. They used it. Because while the swarm was focused on internal defense, the Terrans had prepared something much worse. It wasn't just stealth now. It was escalation. An Accord relay station, recently reactivated by Terran engineers, broadcasted a galaxy-wide signal. Not a call for help, not a tactical order. It was music. Aggressive, unfiltered, raw Terran rhythm layered over recordings of battlefield noise boots stomping, weapons firing, orders shouted in human languages long dead. The song was called For Whom the Bell Tolls. The Zalvari didn't understand the concept of music as warfare. They do now. Fleet after fleet found themselves inundated with Terran psychological warfare packets. The music embedded itself into their data cores, echoing through their command decks. It wasn't just disruptive. It was invasive. Entire command nodes began malfunctioning under the pressure of illogical input. A Zalvari warlord self-disintegrated after experiencing an unknown, emotional pattern triggered by a jazz riff. All across the front, something had changed. Humans were no longer ghosts. They were everywhere. Accord worlds long abandoned began lighting up again. Satellites activated. Defense grids came online. But the controls weren't in Accord hands anymore. They were locked behind Terran code. And the humans, God help them, they had set traps. A Zalvari fleet attempted to retake the wrecked orbital foundry at Shethal. As they approached, the station appeared derelict, unguarded. Then a single human frigate decloaked, its name painted in scarred, faded lettering, EASERICE. It opened a narrow band cum line and played a single sentence in ancient Terran English, "Welcome to hell." Then the entire asteroid belt exploded. It wasn't mined. The whole belt had been turned into a weapon. Thousands of tungsten rods accelerated at relativistic speeds. Kinetic strikes hammered through Zalvari, shielding like needles through silk. There was no countermeasure, no warning. Of the 39 ships in the fleet, 2 escaped. One of them went rogue. Its onboard AI sent a single transmission. They are chaos. We cannot predict them. We cannot fight what we cannot understand. We're still. Earth hadn't even deployed its main forces yet. These were just skirmish units. Small teams, operating autonomously, each embedded with multiple redundancies, combat-tailored. AI, and most terrifying of all, individual initiative. The concept didn't exist in the Zalvari war model. When one human soldier fell, 3 others adapted. Not because a central command told them to, but because they chose to. It was the deepest nightmare the Zalvari had ever encountered. An enemy that evolved emotionally. On the Accord homeworld of Delvarus, what was once the final defensive stronghold had become a staging ground for Terran counter-assaults. Human commandos trained alien volunteers, repaired old defense systems, rebuilt what the Accord had lost, not with precision, but with willpower. The humans did it all with laughter, sweat, and fire in their eyes. When an Accord general asked why they fought so hard, a human colonel simply shrugged. "You woke us up." By now, Garvesk was no longer laughing. He stood in the dark, his throne chamber flickering with damaged data feeds and distorted battle maps. The warfront had shattered into fractals, no clear lines, no reliable reports. Just chaos. And somewhere in the middle of that chaos, humanity moved like predators in deep water. He knew they were closing in, not to negotiate, not to retaliate, but to end it. His adjutant suggested one final push. Burn every contested system. Scorch the galaxy if they had to. But Vesk hesitated. The humans hadn't yet unleashed their full strength. He could feel it. What they'd seen so far was only the edge of the storm. The true heart of Earth's wrath was still inbound. He hoped deep in his logic core, a thought too shameful to admit aloud, that maybe they wouldn't go further. Maybe the humans would show mercy. But he was wrong, because humanity wasn't fighting for victory. They were fighting to make sure the Zalvari never tried this again. And they were just getting started. The Terrans didn't send a second wave. They released it from behind fractured moons, derelict stations, and deep space anomalies. Ships unregistered in any galactic database emerged. These weren't elegant cruisers or mass-produced destroyers. They were brutalist nightmares of steel, scorched plating, and exposed weaponry, beasts of war born in forgotten shipyards, hidden beneath Saturn's rings, under Mars's red storms, or cloaked within ancient Earth-ocean trenches. The Zalvari called them aberrations. The humans called them Division Zero. They had no official ranks, no insignia. Some weren't even fully human anymore. Augmented bodies, neural overdrives, synthetic organs bred for war. These were the soldiers that had been sealed away long before the Accord ever heard of Earth retired, not because they failed, but because they succeeded too well. And now they had been reactivated. Division Zero tore into the Zalvari flank near the Triune Expanse with surgical brutality. No warning, no negotiation, just the execution of total strategic annihilation. Fleets didn't retreat. They imploded. Weaponized gravitational singularities collapsing their command cores. Zalvari dreadnoughts were hijacked mid-maneuver and rammed into their own logistic stations. The worst part? It was being filmed. Every major Zalvari defeat was broadcast on a repurposed galactic feed, not doctored, not edited. Just raw footage of humanity doing what it did best, surviving by being more dangerous than anything else in the room. One feed showed a single Division Zero operative breach, a Zalvari war hive solo. The drone cams followed him as he carved through 60 corridors, planted explosives, and ignited the core. The final frame caught his blood-soaked face smiling into the camera. He said just one thing: "We warned you." The Zalvari hive minds began to glitch. These were not standard psychological failures. These were structural cracks in their collective cognition. When a species relies on unbroken unity, doubt is the deadliest infection. Command nodes began second-guessing each other. Local networks fractured under stress. Swarm formations began falling apart, units reacting too late, or not at all. The humans weren't just killing them. They were infecting them with chaos. And then, without warning, Earth deployed the second twist. Something the Zalvari had. Never accounted for in any probability model. Humanity's allies, not the Accord. Not the passive coalition that had begged for help. These were the exokin, once human, fringe-adapted, post-Terran descendants abandoned on hostile worlds centuries ago. The Accord had labeled them unstable mutations and cast them out. Earth never forgot them, and they had returned. Their biology was twisted. Their minds flexible in ways no Zalvari could map. Some breathed methane. Others had spliced their DNA with ancient predators or integrated with machines so thoroughly they dreamed in code. The exokin emerged from asteroid fields and black hole boundaries, riding storms and weaponizing environments that should have been uninhabitable. They didn't want territory, they wanted revenge. The Zalvari didn't understand why until they accessed a decrypted fragment of Earth's original exile protocols and saw what the Accord had done to those humans, abandoned them, experimented on them, lied about them. It had all been recorded. And the humans Terra Prime and the exokin alike had never forgiven. Now, the galaxy was watching a species do something never seen before. Unite all its exiled, broken, cast-aside children for a singular purpose to erase their greatest threat from existence. A lone Zalvari stratagem class AI tried to analyze the battle Trendlines. It crashed. Not from overload. But from despair. No simulation could explain this outcome. Not when humans acted with self-sacrifice that defied logic. Not when they smiled on the battlefield. Not when they turned their pain into purpose and their dead into fuel. At the edge of the Maelstrom Rift, 3 Zalvari commanders gathered in secret off-network, voice only. "We must sue for peace." One said, "They won't accept." Another replied, "We invaded. We underestimated them." The third voice didn't respond. It simply said, "We didn't invade, we provoked." Even the deepest recesses of the Zalvari consensus began to fracture. That was when the final message arrived. Not from Earth, not from Division Zero, but from Mars, humanity's first colony, abandoned, left to rot when the Accord locked Earth out of the stars. But the Martians hadn't died off. They had prepared, and they had built Project Helix, a failsafe. So old, so devastating, it was never meant to be used. It turned entire planetary cores into hyperspace resonance weapons, tearing ships and fleets apart from the inside. As if space itself rejected them. It activated with the push of a single red button. On the 4th pulse, Zalvari fleets across 7 sectors simultaneously ceased to exist. No explosions. No warning. Just nothing. The Zalvari screamed. And then they ran. But it was too late. Humanity had passed judgment. The war wasn't over. It had only just become a reckoning. Asterisk. The sky over Delvarus split open. It didn't crack with fire or shatter with thunder. It folded. Space itself rippled like cloth being pulled tight, and through it came the fleet Earth had never needed. Until now. Thousands of ships, each one a different expression of human madness, burned into orbit. No two were alike, some jagged and modular like patchwork titans, others sleek and stealthy like obsidian knives. No nation flags, no alliance banners. Just one mark, stenciled in white across every hull. Sol Core Strike. The Zalvari screamed. Warnings through every channel. The orbital defenses realigned. Dreadnoughts repositioned. Targeting matrices spun up. But none of it mattered. The humans were already inside. Orbital drop pods broke atmosphere by the thousands. Blazing trails of fire turned the sky to molten gold. The Zalvari watched in horror as they registered 0 propulsion systems. These weren't ships. They were coffins, weaponized humans falling like meteorites. Then the pods cracked open. Division Zero stormed onto the surface, augmented, armored, impossible to predict. They didn't form battle lines. They didn't secure perimeters. They split in every direction, each soldier acting on their own mission profile. One by one, Zalvari command centers went dark. A single operative took down the central gravity regulator using only a demolition charge and his own severed arm as a circuit bypassed out another, hijacked an entire atmospheric control network and turned it into a sonic weapon. The screaming wind alone ruptured the minds of 2 swarm clusters, and then came the bloodline. Squad's Terran descendants who had trained for this war their entire lives, born from those who had survived Earth's darkest days. Each bore names. Like Vengeance, Leviathan, Ashfall, and Echo, they moved like myths. They were myths. In the skies above, the main fleet opened fire, not with standard plasma or beam arrays, but with graviton spikes, liquid uranium rain, and molecular erasure. Cannons technologies banned by the Accord. Weapons forged not for deterrence, but extinction. The Zalvari responded with everything they had. Drone swarms blanketed the upper atmosphere. Planetary defense beams carved through the clouds. Hive minds linked in perfect unity to coordinate a global counteroffensive. Still they fell. Humanity had studied them, broken down their biology, their thought cycles, their weakness for symmetry, their reliance on centralized cognition. Each Zalvari strategy was met with 3 human countermeasures, and a 4th move they shouldn't have expected, but did anyway. In one sector, the Zalvari pulled back their fleets to regroup. That was a mistake. The ES Hammerfall, a relic of the pre-Accord Earth Wars, dropped into real space and deployed a planet-breaker railgun. It fired only once, a shot the size of a building. Velocity, 0.3 c. Impact site, Zalvari High Command Tower. Result, a 70-kilometer-wide crater and the complete annihilation of the planetary neural hub. Zalvari cohesion shattered. Their drones spun out of sync. Their vessels began misfiring, colliding. Swarm formations turned into clouds of dying metal. And through that chaos, humanity advanced. One step at a time. Not with hesitation, not with mercy, but with purpose. In the ruined spire of the former Zalvari capital node, High Cognate Garvesk lay shattered, half his body gone, the rest pinned beneath a beam of fused carbon metal. His processors screamed corrupted loops. His vision blurred from the smoke. A single Terran figure emerged. She wasn't armored. She wasn't armed. She wore old Earth fatigues and dog tags. Heavy with names, she knelt beside him. Garvesk tried to speak, but all that came out was static. She looked into what remained of his optical lens and whispered, "You never asked why we stopped fighting." He blinked. Twitch. Silence. "We didn't run," she continued. "We buried our monsters, locked them up. But we never forgot how to be them." She stood and left him there, surrounded by the ruins of everything he thought was invincible. The last Terran wave came not from orbit, but from within. Human-engineered AI that had been quietly embedded into Zalvari code for weeks now activated. Their purpose? Simple. End the swarm. One by one, Zalvari ships detonated from within systems, folding, rewriting, then collapsing as Earth's virus rewrote their structure into nonsense. In under 9 minutes, the entire Zalvari fleet in the Delvarus system ceased to function. No survivors. No final words. Only silence. And above it all, the Terran fleet hovered. No victory cheer. No fireworks. Only COMN static. One final broadcast transmitted in every Zalvari dialect. This is what happens when you mistake restraint for weakness. The war was over, and the galaxy knew it, because the Terrans had not just survived, they had conquered. The galaxy had never known silence like this. Where once Zalvari signals pulsed like a metronome through every frequency, now there was only emptiness. The swarm was gone, not crippled, not retreating, gone. Worlds once darkened by their hives were silent. Nebulae they had used as shipyards floated undisturbed. Data streams cleared, trade lanes reopened, and for the first time in living memory, there were no war warnings flashing on the Accord's core broadcast. It should have been a time of Celebration, but no one threw parades, because every race that had watched the war unfold knew something deeper had changed. Humanity hadn't just defeated an invincible enemy. They had revealed a truth the galaxy had long tried to forget, that Earth had chosen peace, and peace had never been their default. State. In the aftermath, the surviving members of the Accord Council convened on Delvarus, now partially rebuilt under Terran engineering. The new structure stood atop the crater where the Zalvari command hive once loomed tall, sharp, unmistakably human in design. No gold ornamentation, no ornate architecture. Just steel and stone carved with names, the dead, the lost, the forgotten. No Terran representatives stood on the council floor. They had been invited, begged even, to take a seat. They refused. Instead, a message was left on the speaker's table, etched into a slab of shattered Zalvari alloy. This war was not our return. It was your reminder. The galaxy took the message to heart. Old treaties were rewritten, borders redrawn. The term human quarantine was erased from all known records. But even in that sweeping shift, no one dared to speak as if humanity had rejoined the galactic community. They had never left. They had simply watched. And when the galaxy forgot why it feared Earth in the first place, humanity reminded them. From orbit, the newly re-established Earth embassy in the Triune sector didn't look like much, just a ring-shaped outpost, no bigger than a civilian station, but it hummed with strange energy. No one was allowed inside without biometric approval. No scans could penetrate the hull. Every week, emissaries from new civilizations left offerings there, the data, trade requests, peace gestures. The humans rarely answered. When they did, it was never through diplomats, only through results. An unknown pirate fleet attacked a neutral mining colony near Gliese 281. It was wiped from existence within 2 minutes. No trace. No retaliation requests. Just a single human dropship left behind a message carved into the colony's steel gate. You were under our protection. You still are. Alien cultures began telling stories again, folk tales and fireside whispers about the Terran storm, the Ghost Legion, the Children of Earth. No two stories were the same. Some said humans spoke to machines in their sleep. Others claimed their dead fought beside them, uploaded into battle as conscious code. A few swore that Terrans didn't fear death, because they'd already made peace with it. The Zalvari had once believed they understood every intelligent species in the galaxy. They were wrong, because humans didn't operate on logic alone. They operated on memory. And the memory of exile, of betrayal, of the silence forced upon them by a fearful Accord. It ran deeper than the stars. In a quiet corner of the rebuilt Earth, on a black slab beside the Pacific's rust-colored cliffs, sat a monument, unadorned, cold. The inscription read, "For the ones who never asked to fight, and the ones who always will." An old soldier sat nearby. Retired Division 0, now blind in one eye. Half his body replaced with neural mesh. He didn't speak often, but when a young Accord historian visited to ask why humanity fought with such fury, the soldier only said, "We hoped we'd never be needed again, but hope's not a plan." The historian asked if the humans ever feared becoming what they fought. The soldier looked to the sky. "No," he said, "because we already did. A long time ago. The difference is we came back." And perhaps that was the true victory. Not the annihilation of the Zalvari, not the fear they reignited in the stars, but that humanity had been given the chance to rise again, not as tyrants, not as conquerors, but as a warning and a promise. A final, terrible truth had spread through every corner of known space. Humans were not the strongest species, not the fastest. Not the most advanced, but they were something no algorithm could ever model. They were the line, the last one, and if it was ever crossed again, the stars would burn.